Yeah, well, thank you so much for doing this. I've been following your channel for a while now because my girlfriend is really into Trisha, and then she got me into your channel. And,
I know it's a funny way how those worlds
yeah.
collide and find
And
themselves.
and the funny thing is our dynamic is really similar
Yeah,
than your dynamic. And so I really relate to your channel, and she really relates to Trisha's channel. And, and I've actually
that's
been
fun.
also taking a lot of inspiration from how you show up in the relationship.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's been inspiring to see, not these all these philosophies not just as words, but just simply embodied as a loving presence. And
Right,
and
right.
that I found really inspiring, and something I'm still working on. You know,
It
I'm
takes time. It took me a while.
exactly, yeah. And and also I'm really fascinated with water. I've been working with resonance images on
Mhm.
taking brain scans, the signals coming out of a brain, electromagnetic waves, and essentially converting them into water and then making water vibrate, which creates resonance images.
Right, like cymatics of brainwaves.
Hmm?
Cymatics of brainwaves.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah, a friend of mine is a scientist in Berlin. He's been working on that, and I found it absolutely fascinating because
Mhm.
it shows if you're in a meditative state, it reflects that intuitively. So if you look at
Mhm.
the image, you instantly you get a calm vibe from it. It
Right.
almost looks like the brainwaves of a Buddhist create mandala-like shapes.
Yeah. Hmm.
And yeah,
Well,
yeah, and
sound waves,
I
sound
say,
waves, sound waves in water is really the architecture. It's how life started.
how so?
That's how water create structures. It's like a 3D printer in the water.
Really?
Yeah, because I mean, we say sound because we think about the way it works
Mm-hmm.
for communication.
Mm-hmm.
But for water, sound is basically the frequencies creates forms, and those three-dimensional forms. That's what it's for, really, in
Right.
water. But we just we're so obsessed with our own experience with sound.
Right.
But for water, it has nothing to do with hearing. It's about
Right.
creating three-dimensional forms. And now you start to see them when you connect your brain, connect your voice,
Mm-hmm.
and all the mythologies, and they all talk about vibration and frequencies being the beginning of life.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what you're looking at now.
Right. I find it also interesting to think about sound as organizing molecules in a space. So
Exactly.
if
So think about a 3D printer through sound in water, and that's how life starts.
Mhm.
The architecture of life.
Right.
Mhm.
And these images in the back of you, in the background,
Mhm.
is this your art?
Yeah, those are the images of the water, and they're big. They're like 1 by 2 meters or 4 by 8 feet.
And this
They're,
is sound in water? Or what is it?
some are sound and some are different kind of movement. It's all about movement, seeing movement in water.
Wow.
So I generate different ways of seeing movement in water.
Mm-hmm.
The most fascinating one is sound. That's the most complex one and
Mm-hmm.
controlled too. So if you have a frequency generator, you can really move from each frequency and see how it rearranges the
Right.
form in the water. One thing that you can't see that I can see with this method is that because when you look at the water, you see the surface. So you see those bumps, right? And you
Right.
see them
The
moving and
waves moving on the
rearranging.
surface.
Those bumps are actually in the water, it's more like tubes and they weave. And what you
Oh,
see, the bumps is actually the water is moving in all directions at once. And that's something that once your eyes see that, they're just in disbelief because it's something we can't perceive for the water to move on its own in all different directions at once. So
wow.
in cymatics, we just think it's a surface
Mm-hmm.
bouncing, but actually there's almost like channels in the water. It's
And
really
those
complex.
channels essentially molecules of water that are in the same wavelength, right? That are oscillating in the same frequencies.
I think it just creates certain movements that are that become like tubes, like the way it resonates through the water.
Mm-hmm.
Because water itself is both electric and to some degree has reaction to those magnetic fields or to the vibration, right? It's a vibration that comes from the vessel.
Can you
Let's
repeat that
see.
again?
The best way to explain it is when you go to a concert,
Mm-hmm.
you see the audience
Yeah.
and the movement of the audience to the music is cymatics, is exactly the same thing. If you put a blanket on the audience,
What you would see the wave.
yeah, but in reality, the water is dancing and it's a lot of individuals dancing.
Right. Right. So each molecule is having its own motion, its own
Mhm.
dance, and all the
Yeah,
molecules together are creating these resonance images.
yeah. And there's a certain order in it, just like you have in music and dance. There's,
Yeah. Yeah. I found it really interesting because I think that order actually ties into this kind of weird, but I believe that order extends beyond like the physical reality, but that order in itself is the expression of consciousness and matter. That consciousness is an order-seeking principle.
in
That
this
is,
world, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, consciousness is before matter, before order.
Mm-hmm.
And this world, this material world, is an experience of order, right? But in other, there's more than this world, there's other layers. So some
Mm-hmm.
of them have experience of complete free form.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, there's no order at all. And so there's many different layers, but in this specific layer we're in, it's all about order, structure, architecture, shape, matter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's correct. I mean, that's
Yeah, I think I'm using the term order also, not just relationship to matter, but
mhm.
for me, order in consciousness is the will to benefit other. So
I mean, yeah, there's been
collaboration.
right.
Because whenever you have order in, let's say, water, you have molecules collaborating with each other in terms of
Mhm.
sharing the same resonance,
Yeah.
sharing the same pattern, becoming part of the same pattern. And so I think order in consciousness might reflect that attitude of the will to create order together. And so the ordered
Mhm.
systems might be driven by the consciousness modality that we experience as love. That's kind of an idea I've been toying with. But
Mhm.
what I find very interesting is you say consciousness is primary. What experience led you to this belief or conclusion or ideology?
Logic,
Huh?
just logic. Logic.
Logic.
Yeah, it's just logical.
Also, because most scientists would disagree, right? Most scientists believe that we can derive all experience from material interactions.
Well, there's science of matter, but
Yeah.
they step outside of their boundary to talk about consciousness. Show me what tools they use and what measurements to measure consciousness. You see, it's like a dentist telling your mechanic what to do about your car. Like there's many different disciplines, but
Mm-hmm.
when scientists step, so let's walk back. Okay, so consciousness is the first thing that exists, and
Mm-hmm.
then consciousness creates situations, creates these universes or worlds.
Mm-hmm.
In our world, consciousness is the scientist that is taking matter and using it in a creative way to build architecture. So consciousness is the scientist, and we use science to basically learn about matter, develop it, develop techniques, technologies, all those
Mm-hmm.
things. But then once you start turning those methods back towards consciousness, that's in a way a mistake, because the science of consciousness is art, poetry. I mean, art in the many different fields, right? Visual,
Right.
dance, poetry, philosophy, psychology. Like consciousness has a very big, you know, world of science of its own. But
Mm-hmm.
it's the confused ones that think that, oh, I measure the atoms, I measure matter.
Right.
Now I'm
I'm
going to use
thinking
that to
of
measure
an
consciousness.
objective world, and my consciousness isn't in relationship. It doesn't influence it. I mean, even the double slit experiment is kind of shown that, right? You know,
Mm.
we always tried. We always thought that we can look at experiments objectively, and then the double slit experiment suddenly showed that our knowledge about the position of an atom or a subatomic particle changes its reality.
Right.
So suddenly the scientist can no longer take himself or herself out of the equation.
Well, what you'll see is that now, because the classical science is so stuck, that people have said, you know what, let's not fight with those old people. Let's just create quantum mechanics, right? So now you have a whole world of science.
Mm-hmm.
So you have quantum mechanics, and then you have the classical mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, you know what, okay, you live over there happily, and we'll live over here, and we're not going to fight each other. But
Right.
at the same time, quantum mechanics actually talks about the connection between consciousness and matter. They're looking for that space. And they find that that happens in a place that is very small and not so visible, not as predictable, not as. So you start to see how the science of consciousness and the spirit found a new way to talk about things. But a scientist that measures gravity will never be able to tell you anything about consciousness. And if they try, you just know that they have some kind of illusion in their head about what it's political.
So you're saying that you arrived at this worldview purely through logic?
Yeah.
Not
And I mean,
at all meditation or mystical experiences, none of that.
right. I mean, I think so. I think everyone has this knowledge in them. So if you have the ability to shut off all the distractions, the voices, the thoughts, then you start getting the actual gut feeling, the intuition. You start to learn and know things. For some people, that's maybe how they describe meditation. But I think even the word meditation has been corrupted, because people use meditation to distract themselves from their own gut feeling and knowledge. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like meditation itself has become a distraction rather than, depends again if you do it right or not. So I just, for me, it's more about having full control over your mind and not letting the mind control you.
Right. And then I guess logic has a different meaning. If you just
It's
follow like preconceived
yeah,
thoughts that you accumulated in your environment, or if you have a calm, steady presence with which you navigate, and see things anew.
exactly. Yeah, with no opinion, with no distraction, with no
Right.
preconceived notions, and
Yeah. I think it makes a lot of sense to me, but I also know that there is 99.9% of all scientists would not agree that
and that's
that
fine.
that is
That's
totally
totally
fine.
fine. Yeah, because they'll still do their job. You know what I mean? Like each person on this planet has a job to do.
Right.
So they have a lot of other opinions that are ridiculous or not, but that doesn't matter. You know,
Right.
that's what I mean. That's politics. Politics is where people start to tell you, well, I really want you to think the same way that I do, even
Right.
though you make music and I build architecture. Who cares? I don't care what you think, as long as you do your job and you're happy. If you're happy, you're not going to come and hurt me or take something that's mine, right? But
Yeah.
the world of politics corrupts,
Hmm.
and its job is to divide, right? And divide and create a certain mechanism.
Right.
But I want to go back to where you started with consciousness, and so love, consciousness, and then the individuals working together,
Hmm.
right? So consciousness is one being. It's one thing that has no separation. In that, when it comes to the material world, here we experience separation. So we're like astronauts. Like there's a drop of consciousness in your body, your vehicle. There's a drop of consciousness in my body, my vehicle. But they both belong to one ocean.
Hmm.
So we're now in a temporary state of separation and in a temporary state of unity. And that's really the source of, I don't know why my microphone just changed, but that's really all of our problems.
Wait, I think you just cut out.
Yeah,
No,
I think my microphone
now
for
I hear
some
you again.
reason.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is the source of all the problems and issues in life, is that separation, that temporary state of separation. And what you were talking about earlier is reminding people that there's actually no separation, that consciousness is one being.
Mm-hmm.
So we should work together, or we should collaborate, or we should, that type of
Mm-hmm.
message.
And is that something you also arrived that conclusion through logic, or did you arrive at that conclusion through any mystical
Through,
experiences?
through water.
Through water.
So water, yeah, yeah, because it's so the material world. You have the table of elements. There's many different elements,
Yeah.
and that is the differences between us, right? Like the architecture of your body, it's like a building. It has a
Mm-hmm.
color, it has a shape, but it's just a building. It's not the soul. It's not the person that resides in the building, right? So your house, when I see it now, looks very different from my house when you see it now. But the entity in it is the conscious being. The
Yeah.
water in me and the water in you is the same water. So that's where I find where we are the same. And the water in you and the water in me goes back to the ocean and becomes one again. When the soil, the architecture of your body is just going to shed down where you stand, and mine will shed here. And they won't mix or join together anymore. That's not so. So it's really through studying the architecture of the body. Um, I think my goal was to find a more scientific way, physical way, symbolic way to show people things that are beyond words and that are hard. Because you keep talking about the mystical experience. You can take a person and shove some, drugs into them, meditation, different
Mm.
type of practices, and maybe they'll get there. But you can also just explain it.
Right.
So water is a way that you can explain it. That's what I find.
Mm-hmm. I found that really interesting what you said, that essentially, what are we, like 95% water or 90% or something like that?
Well, when you're born, you are mostly water. And as you grow older, you kind of dry out slowly.
Really?
So, yeah. So a baby is like 90%. And then as an adult, you are in the 80%, and it keeps going down.
Really?
Closer to when you die, you may be 65%, 70%
Okay.
water. Yeah. It's
Wow.
really like slowly the water leaves your body. And I mean, you see the people, they kind of shrink and shrivel. And
Yeah.
that's, you just think about it. You're just a balloon of water. That's all.
Essentially, we're just individuated drops of water.
Exactly.
And even the water in us, so is not always the same water. I mean, it's like always,
There's a
recycled.
flow.
There's a
Yeah.
flow through our shapes of water.
Yeah. You're almost like a
Like a vessel.
entertainment park,
Uh,
like,
yeah, like
yeah.
the riverbed.
You're an experience, and water flows through your body and has this whole experience and out. But I think there's a certain amount of water that is in your body and inherently stays there until you die and it leaves your
Really?
body. Yeah, I think like there is something in the water in you, the individual, that experience it, that has more of a continuous experience.
Mm. Is that proven scientifically that there's water that stays in the body and water that flows through? Or
That's just a concept that's in my
yeah.
mind.
Mhm.
I think that as the um, think about it almost like society. Always think about society and try to scale it down to the human body,
Mhm.
right? So it forms certain architecture and hierarchy and governance, and as it grows, people take their positions and places, and just like you have royal families that has been
Mhm.
in place for ages. And I think it's same thing in our body. Like it naturally creates a certain hierarchy
Order.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and
Organization.
continuity.
Mhm.
Yeah, so organizations, organs, that's what they are in your body, right?
Mhm.
So
Right.
just like we have different organizations, your body has organs, and they serve the same purpose.
Right.
So,
There are
so I think,
organizations of the body.
yeah, but but I guess your body is the main thing that creates that continuity, because your body is like the hard drive. It's where all the folders are in, the memories, the experiences, and those things make you a different individual than me, right? Your personality comes from those experiences, storing those experiences, and then living life through them. Because if the water in your body was here, you would be me. If the water in my body was you, I would be you.
So you think we are essentially water having a human experience?
I don't think even the human experience exists. We are consciousness. Water is the best symbol for that consciousness
Okay, it's a
residing within the matter. So you're a vehicle. Your body is a vehicle. You're like an astronaut right now, outside of the body of consciousness. That's why sometimes you feel lonely, alone, or you have affinity to other people, right? You want to join back that body of water.
Right.
So sometimes you can hug somebody and you can't get, you just want to be absorbed into one.
Yeah.
But we can't because our bodies keeps those borders for now.
Right.
So water is either, I think the best way to use water is a symbol for consciousness, because you don't want people to think that consciousness is separate than matter or anything around you. There's first consciousness.
Water is a form of consciousness.
It's the symbol of the active consciousness. So consciousness made this world, and in this world he said, okay, we have building blocks, and then we have consciousness. It's like a video game, right? You create software, you can create hardware, and then you create the place for us to play in, right? But in that equation, it said, okay, this thing is matter, and you can use it to build certain things, but it still is a reflection of consciousness. But it's not, it's potential consciousness, but it's not active, it's passive.
Yeah, super interesting.
That makes sense.
I love your unique approach to this. It's, you know, I share most of your philosophy through my own experiences, kind of pieced it together. I started this journey when I went to a meditation retreat as a complete atheist, and I really didn't even believe in consciousness. I thought there is no free will. I thought matter creates the illusion of consciousness.
Right.
And, you know, basically the materialistic dogma that 99% of scientists have. But I went to this meditation retreat just to deal with anxiety. And I found myself getting really into it. And after like meditating for 60 hours or 70, I think 10 hours a day for 7 days. And then I suddenly had this experience of pure consciousness, totally unidentified with my form.
Right.
And it was just the most vivid, touching and real experience of my life. And it's kind of, then it was a long roller coaster trying to, you know, make sense of that experience because of its gravity and its power. And, you know, then I started writing books and interviewing scientists, and I was literally obsessed with trying to figure out what that was and how to make sense of it. And then I started realizing, as I interviewed more scientists, that most scientists have actually no idea about what consciousness is. It's like the one big mystery that no one really knows. And yeah, I
because it is, I mean, there's one thing you do know is your experience.
Right.
I am consciousness.
Yeah. But
Like
know of it in terms of equations and you know, intellectual knowledge. We know of it as direct experience.
Which is what consciousness is.
Yeah. We know consciousness
Consciousness,
we are it.
but also that's what consciousness does. Consciousness is the thing that experiences. And it's always experiencing. Now, it doesn't even have memory. It only has the present experience. That's why your body is constructed, so you can store memories in you to create this personality, to store knowledge, DNA, right? So there's a buildup of knowledge and libraries of knowledge in the biological world for consciousness to use and flow through.
Right.
But consciousness itself that's all it does is experience.
Yeah.
In the moment.
Right.
There's no time.
That's also what I felt during this meditation retreat, where I was I was just experience.
There's no past, there's no
Yeah,
future.
there's no past or future. I had no like name either. It was
Hmm.
just, it was
Yeah.
almost a little frightening because it was so far into like this bliss state of,
Hmm.
it was almost like, yeah, it was like a big,
What's dying? You
hmm?
basically die.
Yeah, it felt like
Because
I was dead. And then someone asked me who I am, what my name was, and all I felt was just this tremendous love for this person. And then I had to be like, oh my God, like I am something. I am a human. I have a life. I am a saxophonist. And all of that seemed like so far away. And
right.
it was crazy. It was totally sober, experiencing such an intensity of pure consciousness was life changing. And yeah, now I just try to, integrate that more into daily life because it's impractical when it's so overwhelming. At least to me,
Which
it's,
is which is the reason most people don't know it.
yeah,
Because like I said, we're here to do a certain function, a
right.
job. So it's like the horse have the blinds on.
Yeah, right.
So
Yeah, exactly.
if you see too much or know too much, you just won't be able to function anymore. And that's why 99% of scientists don't know this,
Hmm.
because they need to do the 99% of the job that their part is.
Right. This one scientist I interviewed, Donald D. Hoffman, had this really interesting phrase. He said that this 3D reality is essentially a data construct to facilitate transactions within consciousness, and
Mhm.
that it purposely hides the truth for convenient and efficient interactions. He said,
Right,
imagine you would write an email by rearranging zeros and ones. You would never send that email
right.
because just typing one letter is already a string of data. And if you
Right.
were to go and move that manually, you would lose track of what you're trying to say.
Hmm.
So he says that having this physical reality is essentially an illusion generated to facilitate transactions between conscious agents. And yeah, I found that interesting. That the illusion and hiding information for convenience, not out of malintent, but
And that is the core um, thing to understand, is that there is no bad intent. Like everything is done for a reason.
right,
And also developing trust that the bigger ocean of consciousness knows what it's doing.
right.
And me as a drop of water right now and trying to figure it all out, that's not going to happen, because I'm just a drop of water. There's an
Yeah,
entire ocean of consciousness that,
exactly. It's like a drop of water in a wave, trying to understand
yeah.
the whole wave.
And also, we we give ourselves so much credit, but we did not the human form did not create the human form.
Yeah,
Like,
that's a
and
good point.
and and we keep forgetting that. I mean, we are the most complex technological machines out there, and something created that for a purpose, and we are inside of that, playing that game for that purpose.
Hmm.
But sometimes, like you said, the reason that journey started for you was because your functionality was in jeopardy because of your anxiety. So there's people that do need and could find help with this knowledge
Right.
to help them with that, right?
True
So
that.
I mean, and even in that, it's not it's just the evolution of creation. So look at cars. When now we have car accidents, but we keep improving those vehicles, so there'll be less and less and less and less, and we get to a point where we'll have self-driving cars with zero accidents.
Hmm.
But somebody might say in the future, well, there was a conspiracy to kill people with cars, or some, like,
Right.
no, there was actually no that was the functionality. We did the best we could, but we constantly evolved and
Right.
became better and better. So we are a vehicle, and we are still in that evolution of creation, and we're still
Right.
evolving and getting better and finding more ways to improve our experience here,
Hmm.
which I personally believe is temporary. So the focus should not be totally on just human beings. Human beings are not the center of life. Consciousness is. And understanding what consciousness is doing and why is actually important.
Right.
But it creates friction, though, because we're so invested in the human experience and the human identity. So when you try to take that away, people think you're trying to harm them.
Or ruin the game. Sometimes
Right.
I feel like, some people don't want to play a game where they're not fully immersed, because I think becoming aware of consciousness sort of as something transcendental and beyond the human experience, it almost reduces the human experience a little to where it's not so heavy. Right. But you are ruining someone's game if they want to play that heavy game.
If it's a game of identity, yeah.
Right. A game of identity. Fully
Which
immersive
now
virtual reality. It's like you go in a fully immersive virtual reality and someone's like, hey, this is not real. This is
exactly. But you are real. But your being and your experience, that's what they don't understand, is that losing the human identity is not losing. You're not losing something.
Right. Yeah, you're not losing it.
Yeah, because I mean, at the other end, you gain the peace and the knowledge of your true being. But again, you have to also remember there are people that might take and abuse that, to say, well, nothing really matters.
Right.
Because I'm just, let me just meditate all day, every day, and not contribute to society. Or so again, there is something that we're doing here, and I think that's important to understand. And that's why it's good, for example, for you to take your experience and give it to somebody that can't go and meditate for 60, 70 hours. Because some people don't have that time even. They just work all day and they have that same anxiety and same. So finding ways to give them that knowledge and experience and gift, but just to help elevate their experience rather than take away their identity.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I think it's also really important to, like right now we're sort of approaching consciousness through all these concepts, right? Understanding it intellectually and talking about it and so forth. I think for me it's really important to remember, because I really like doing that, just going off in thoughts but to remember, okay, it needs to be embodied in action and in presence. And I find
it's fun.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fun. I mean, that's my favorite thing to do, to dive into a thought and have this like 3 and 4D game in my head from all directions, resolving a certain idea or concept.
Clarifying it, tuning it, testing it out.
And then it got to a point where I felt like I had like fire inside of me. It was choking me because there was so much that I had in me. And that's why I started Channel Water, is I just started putting it out there.
Yeah.
And every time that I made a video and put something out there, it was a relief. But then something else came up. And then so for you have your practice with music, and like I really enjoy your videos and your channel. And if I was a musician, that's how I see myself doing that. Like because for me, music is the best way. Like I'm that way of words, visuals, and music. Like that experience, right? Being immersed in it. And so I think it's a great medium, and there's that's the way you go, like with your natural talent.
I think it is for me. It is also like, since this meditation experience, I play music very differently, because I feel like I go into that space on stage where I'm playing and talking from this non-conceptual place of no identity, of just being and
channeling. That's basically, you're just channeling, and you let it channel through you with no obstruction. Because usually our thoughts
different degrees. Sometimes, my relationship drama or this or that.
But that's the real, because for me, for example, when I did the cloud meditation video,
Hmm.
that video was to help people with anxiety and where the thoughts are just taking
Yeah,
over.
absolutely.
And right when I was working on that, like one of the worst things happened. And it
Really?
was a gift because I had to make it to work, because if it didn't work for me at that moment,
Yeah.
it's not going to work for anyone. So when those things happen, you have to even go further and take it on and create. And most likely, what you create in that moment to help you with that drama will help other people even more.
Yeah. Yeah. In my relationship, I feel I'm really being put to a test of um, having the ability to hold space for heavy emotions and to not go into my mind and judgment and defense,
Mhm.
and be that open channel of consciousness and of love. And
So, judgment, so you know that judgment is just a form of hate.
how so?
When we don't see the other person as myself,
Hmm.
that if I was that person right now, I would do exactly what they just did.
Right.
And I don't have the right to judge them. And
Yeah.
more than that, if I was that person, I wouldn't want to be judged too. Like
Right.
we don't have, but when we have judgment in us towards people, it's a form of hate. It's a way of not, because the only thing that love is no judgment. That's what real love is. If somebody, hugs you one day, but the next day rejects you, hugs you, loves you, judge you, that's not love. That's just hate.
Hmm.
That's just judgment. So when you are actually in a loving space, you have no judgment towards any person in this world, ever. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to stay in a situation,
Right.
because the other side might not understand what you understand. And maybe their mechanism is just judgment and hate.
Right.
So that doesn't mean that you have to subject yourself to that. But if somebody comes to you with the force that is a force of judgment, is a force of hate, makes you feel bad, now the question is, are you going to reflect back the hate to them or the love?
Yeah.
Are they able to turn you into a hateful person now, to a judgmental person? So that's what happens to most people. Their parents turn them into hateful, judgmental people.
Right.
That's when that happens, and then we carry it through the rest of our
Right.
lives.
I think in one of your videos you said you judge your parents for being the way they are, and by that you become what you hate.
You become a judgmental person.
Yeah, you become
Yeah.
that.
And then we are attracted to what we hate and we become that. And more than that, then we actually marry somebody that is exactly what we hate because we're attracted to it. It has
Right.
this pull. And so the key is to not react with judgment and hate to a situation, and
Yeah.
not for the other person, for you.
Hmm.
Not to let them take away your grace, not to let them turn you into them.
Right.
So again, then comes the choice of, then you can walk away from that person or that situation. But a lot of times when you don't react the way that they expect you to react, it takes away the power from their mechanism, because people use that to control you, to upset you,
Hmm.
right? Like if somebody upsets you, now they can control you
Hmm.
because you lose your logic, you become emotional, you lose your ability to make the right decision and to act out of love. Now you start acting out of hate and judgment.
Right.
So that's really where, that's the heart of the thing is. And I think because somebody else told me that they were looking at my relationship and they were trying to think about, how to enter a relationship and love somebody and all those things. And I tried to explain to them, when you're able to love, it doesn't matter who's in front of you. It's not that personal. Like at that moment, you have the capacity to love anyone and not judge the partner, the person that's in front of you. And then you can choose the partner you want to be with, but the ability is not something that comes from the person in front of you.
Mm.
You know, it's not that, oh, I fell in love in somebody and now I'm in love. First, you are in love, and then you bring somebody into your life.
Mm. So you think partner choice is mostly rational?
Which one?
You think choosing a partner is mostly rational?
For most people, it happens through the mechanism of hate and judgment, not through love.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, you'll see most relationships, they'll take somebody, they put them up on a pedestal just to then take them down.
Right.
You know, it's very simple. Most people that will hear what I'm about to say will say, that's my life. Most people in relationship look at their partner and just look to judge every little move and moment they do. That's not a loving relationship.
Yeah.
And to be able to be in a loving relationship is you look at a person and they do something that you perceive as wrong, and you have so much love for them and understanding why they're doing that and where it came from, that your reaction is not going to be with anger, it's not going to be with judgment, and you're just going to look at the situation and fix it and help resolve whatever that is. But it's the anger and the judgment that then create anxiety and stress, and then it's like a war. Suddenly both sides are just like
Yeah.
at war with each other, and that's not it, you know.
So how would you approach the intensity of the emotions that drive judgment and hate? Like, I feel like some people hearing this might be like, this is way too much to even tackle. You know, this is, the emotions are so much, so heavy. How?
You I think the work is personal, it's in you. So you step back to your own personal upbringing, and you find that moment where somebody put that in you.
Right.
Because when you were born perfect, and at some moment somebody put their hate, their judgment. And that's why I don't like talking about it in that way, but think about it as a spirit, because it's not you, it doesn't belong to you. Somebody puts something inside of you that's not yours.
Mm-hmm.
Now that thing resides in you. So the moment that we're able to see that that thing is not me, that emotional thing, that reactive thing, that judgment, that hate, that being in me that is just looking to do those things is not me. I wasn't born with that. Then you start separating from it. So the first moment is to see that it's not you. And all those thoughts in your head, language, words in your head, that's not you. So as those thoughts start telling you, oh, look what she's doing, look what's happening, she's doing this to you, she's doing that to you, that voice is not you, that's your enemy.
Mm-hmm.
You have to separate from that voice. And just like the meditation you did for 60, 70 hours was just to get to that place where the voice goes away.
Right.
And when that voice is not there anymore, then you actually see the situation. You're like, you see the person like a lost child that made a mistake. How can you be angry at them? You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
more likely, they're more upset than you will ever be about what they did, that triggered that in you.
Right.
So when you help them see that you're not there to judge them, you're not hating them, you're not upset, you're just there to help and resolve those things, usually things get resolved, and then they feel so now you're starting to push out the hate from them with your love, and they see you, and that becomes an example to them how to be, and they become that way too. But it's hard because you can't teach it and you can't force it, and you can't, it has to be understood, and
Right.
it has to be something that you want to do, that you ask me that, but I will never go to somebody and tell them that.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I'll always be myself and give the example.
Yeah.
If they want to, they can look and see.
Yeah. I think, you know, I think there's a lot of friction created in the spiritual community by people imposing this mindset on others rather than
Mhm.
just having it be their personal thing. you know,
And
like,
and forget the spiritual community. There's no such thing.
I mean,
If there's a hierarchy, there's just another structure of
right,
hierarchy. It's political, or it's not. There is no. Um, the reality is that when you get to that state, you would not want to have that many people even around you,
right,
or having those. I don't know. Because I was in that world, and what I found is that I was surrounded with people that were just obsessed about themselves and their personal experience, and
right.
from one workshop to the next workshop to the next workshop to the next, and every day they're like, I made another breakthrough and another breakthrough. I'm like, just stop judging and hating. I mean, how many breakthroughs do you need? Like,
Yeah,
like,
there's definitely a lot of that.
so they are basically a product for a harvest. Somebody's profiting off of them being lost.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
again, that's the distraction, right? It's like you can drink alcohol, you can take drugs, you can smoke, or you can go to endless workshops. Either way, you're going to give them the money and time
yeah.
instead of living your life.
Do you drink?
No, I mean, I don't like to lose. Like, yeah, I don't really drink, smoke. I don't even. That's what's amazing about my relationship now, is that we are constantly sober and happy.
Yeah,
Like, we got together around that, where a lot of relationships get together around abusing the same substances.
right,
So usually people, and then when that's gone, the fun is gone, and then they look at each other and like, "Who are you, and why are we here?"
right.
Our situation is different. We just enjoy each other so much that we're just sober.
Hmm. Do you talk with with Trisha about these concepts, or does she share these same philosophies, or is it more your personal thing?
We don't talk about it because I think we both just understand it.
Hmm.
It's like if you were the same thing. If you're a mechanic, you're not going to go home and talk to your wife all day about, oh, we found this part and we fixed that part. And, guess what? I figured out this thing. If you do, then the wheel turns. Like, it's more, we're just living.
Yeah,
Because I mean, when you go through the whole journey, you just go back to the place of understanding that the purpose of life is to live it.
right. You know what's
And
really funny? I was gonna say that exact same sentence just now.
yeah,
Because
so we made a full circle to that.
I literally was gonna say I love the quote you said. The purpose of life is to be in it.
Is living it. Is
Yeah.
that But I think a lot of us have had so much trauma and hurt growing up that it takes, so it wasn't just there, we couldn't just live it. We had to resolve certain things so we
Hmm.
can enjoy it and live it. And
Well, I think this is a beautiful full circle that we did here, and thank you for joining me on this conversation.
anytime.
Yeah, I'm gonna end the video now.